Hey there, sports fans. PTQ in Liverpool for modern format. We have Andrew Quinn playing the Johns, and as soon as this little thing flips over, we see John Malanaphy playing Haunted Zoo, and there's certainly some nice little cards there for the Haunted Zoo player.
Yeah, I mean, I was very surprised that there wasn't more Haunted Zoo in the format. I just supposed that getting hold of that many shock lands, 4 Geist of Saint drafts and all the fetch lands could be quite hard for some people. I mean, we only saw 8 of this deck in the field. I would have thought it would have been a lot more than that. Andrew Quinn taking 4 on the first turn to Thoughtseize John there.
And seeing some spell.
Seeing 2 Geist of Saint draft, which is probably going to upset him quite a lot there. He also sees a Deathrite Shaman and a Tarmogoyf.
Well, that's almost a perfect 7 cards then, really, isn't it?
The only thing that John might want to see in his hand there is to see some burn. I mean, his deck has a lot of removal. He has Lightning Bolts, Lightning Helix, Tribal Flames and Path to Exile.
You figure you're going to draw into some of that though at some point?
You would really.
But as far as opening hands are concerned, you want to get some board presence out there, and
yeah, he's got
Shaman, Tarmogoyf, and the big man himself.
Yeah, Geist of Saint draft is one of the pillars at this time in the format, or at the time the tournament was a pillar of the format. It's so hard to deal with. And Andrew makes what I think is the correct decision there and takes the Deathrite Shaman because he's going to slow John down by a turn or 2 with that.
Yeah, the Geist of Saint draft is still coming out otherwise, and of course he's got a dead one in his hand if there's one already on the board. So.
Exactly. I mean, taking the Deathrite, taking the Geist of Saint draft there doesn't make any sense. So the only thing that he would maybe consider taking is the Tarmogoyf.
And we certainly see in a lot of these formats now, really standard, modern and legacy, is that Deathrite has on occasion sort of dominated the board.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful effect, incredibly powerful creature. It's just that it does so much for everything. It's mana acceleration, it's a curse scroll, and it's a life gain spell as well. And the thing is, you're so loath to point. You often will point removal spells at it, but because it's just a 1/2 for 1, it just feels like if you're very light on removal and you're having to point it at Deathrite Shamans, it just makes Tarmogoyfs and the other spells in the deck just so much more effective. We have Dark Confident there from Andrew, and he knows that it's clear at the moment.
I'll say nice product placement there from the bottle of Mountain Dew.
Yeah, we'll have to get some. We'll have to get some royalties off Mountain Dew for that one.
Covering half of the play area there.
Yeah, true.
It's not even green though, that's the thing.
Yeah, that is the thing. I mean, very.
When is Mountain Dew orange?
Oh no, it must be a new one. I wonder how much Mountain Dew was actually consumed over the course of this PTQ. Have to get some figures on that one. I imagine it's quite a lot. Andrew does have Dark Confident in play at the moment. It's a
game winner. It's a game winner if it sticks.
And the fact he's now got 2 Deathrite Shaman as well with that Dark Confident means that not only can he control the size of John's Tarmogoyf.
He's seen that John's got no removal in his hand.
Yeah.
So he's just hoping that the Bob's going to stick and do the job.
Yeah, I mean, usually against a deck like Zoo, you're a little bit worried with a card like Dark Confident on the board, but because of Deathrite Shaman just negating any damage that can happen with the Dark Confident, unless he's unlucky enough to just draw into consistent Bloodbraid Elves with it, it's not going to be a huge worry for him.
But he's down to 11, and trouble can certainly start, and John's capable of turning it around if he can start peeling those 3rd land like he just has.
Yeah, and if he draws a couple of Tribal Flames as well, he can, 11 is not a very safe life total against a deck with Tribal Flames.
Yeah, if John had a different draw here, like a draw with a couple of Tribal Flames here, all of a sudden, Andrew would be on 2.
Yep, and we've got Geist of Saint Truff there, and even though Kitchen thinks from Andrew there, so he goes down to 8, and
pretty certain he'll be playing that bad boy straight out.
Yep, and the thing is, even if the Geist of Saint Truff dies, it's going to deal 4 with the Angel anyway, and then there's another one to come back down here, so even though Andrew's drawing cards at a rate of knots here and John doesn't appear to have a huge amount of presence. Andrew's very much in danger at this point. Well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if your opponent's got a board full of creatures. If he's on no life, he's on no life.
Exactly. Well. So who would you consider to be the control deck out of the two? Who's going to be the one who's trying to keep the board clear and who's the one trying to dump his guts and swing in?
John's definitely going to be the control deck in this matchup. It's got the life game with Kitchen Finks and Deathrite Shaman, it's got card draw with Dark Confidence, and it's got the it's got sort of discard and just trying to pin the opponent.
Do you feel
back.
Haunted Zoo's just a deck that the longer it goes on, it just runs out of gas because it's not got that much in a way of card advantage?
I mean, it's kind of difficult for the deck to run out of gas because it's got so much burn, and it does have a slightly decent long game with Lingering Souls, and the fact that it has Bloodbraid Elf as well. Bloodbraid Elf just gives you a medium to sort of slightly long game. But yeah, the longer the game goes, the Andrew's going to be happier because he's going to draw more cards, and he's also going to be able to use his Deathrite Shaman. As you can see here, he's really going to work on John's. He's really going to work on John's graveyard there, and he's going to put the Dark Confident in the way of the Geist of Saint Traff there. So.
Can't afford to take any more life.
No, I mean if he takes the full 6 there and doesn't kill the, and the only other option was putting the Kitchen Finks in the way of it, and I think that Andrew would rather keep that Kitchen Finks on the board for the moment, knowing full well that it's keeping the Tarmogoyf at bay because he can just shrink the Tarmogoyf whenever he feels like it. Second Geist of Saint Traff from John there. So John hasn't really revealed anything that he's drawn yet, so that hand of his is more than likely going to have... Andrew's got to figure there's got to be some kind of burn spell sitting in there at the moment.
I mean, the great thing about these Jun decks and why they were so successful is, you know, it's a deck that pretty much plays itself on the most part.
For the most part, there are some difficult decisions to make. Usually it's regarding Deathrite Shaman timing, so that's usually what the main area is going to be. But yes, Jun does have just some of those draws where it just curves into Bloodbraid Elf and you can't stop it. Or it goes discard spell, removal spell, Bloodbraid Elf, and just starts dominating the board.
The tough decisions for some people were whether to Lightning Bolt or 2/3 Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, that's one of the good ones. Also, we've also had. I think the best one we had was a friend of ours who managed to dismember who tried to dismember a 4/5 Tarmogoyf when there was no instance in the graveyard.
To be honest, there's not many times there's a 4/5 Tarmogoyf about with no instance in the graveyard.
No, it was a case of sorceries, planeswalkers, and various other things were in the graveyard, but somehow instant wasn't.
And if that was Legacy, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Brainstorm's usually the first card to go into a Legacy graveyard.
Yeah, to be fair, that is true.
So the game's kind of gummed up a little bit here, but how do you feel it's looking for both of the guys?
I think John's definitely ahead at this point, unless Haunted Zoo can do something about it. The fact is that those Deathrite Shaman are going to keep the graveyards empty, which means that the Tarmogoyf really isn't that big of a threat at the moment. Plus the fact there's 2 creatures in the graveyards means that's Andrew potentially on 14, which is quite hard to burn him out from. So really John's got to try and make some kind of move at the moment if he can while Andrew's tapped out. He's just having a bit of a think about what he's doing here.
It's a very demoralising card in this matchup, Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, it's certainly... whenever it's active you always feel like you're behind. Just absolutely all the time.
I mean, John, he's looking at making him out sort of 6 or 8 spirits quite early in the game and flying over his head.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Deathrite Shaman is effectively unless you're going to use Lingering Souls as pretty much an air elemental so you don't give him priority, Lingering Souls just turns into pretty bad midnight haunting if there's an active Deathrite Shaman. I mean, it's a card that's very good against Jund if it doesn't have that Deathrite Shaman, because Jund doesn't really have any
it certainly
sort of
means that
trample.
John can't play out his Lingering Souls until he's at 5 mana, which a huge disadvantage in these kind of matchups to lose your tempo like that.
Yeah, I mean, Haunted Zoo also doesn't really want to be making 5 lands if it can avoid it. Okay, Andrew went to activate his Deathrite Shaman for mana there, and in response, John's lightning bolted his the other Deathrite Shaman. So very strange ability on Deathrite Shaman. It's one of the very few mana abilities that actually uses the stack. So good play from John there. He managed to negate the Deathrite Shaman to a degree there. And he's also got an instant in the graveyard, meaning that he's powered up his Tarmogoyf to a degree as well. And so Andrew makes a Tarmogoyf of his own, so they're just going to look at each other for a little bit. Noticing there, Andrew didn't leave red up, although I suppose he's got the he does have the Deathrite there to produce red should he wish to produce red. That's one thing that you can do with the Jund deck, and especially with Deathrite Shaman, is that you can kind of hide what mana you've got available, and you can put a little mental note in your opponent's head that maybe he doesn't have Lightning Bolt or Terminate up. John just says go there, so
It looks like he's starting to run out of a little bit of gas here.
I mean, the fact he's not committing more forces to the board tends to make me believe at this point that he's building up for some kind of burn you draw.
But, you know, Andrew's quite happy to see burn spells being pointed at creatures.
Yep, and once again, Andrew's decided to gain a little bit of life, and John has Lightning Helix the Deathrite Shaman there. So
Probably the best choice there.
probably true, but again, it's a little bit demoralising as the burn deck there, where you have 6 points of burn in your hand, and you have to aim them at 1/2 schmoes rather than trying to actually kill your opponent. Again, Andrew being the control deck here, he doesn't really need to force the issue too much.
Yeah, he's just going to try and keep his life up and have the inevitability that the Jund decks tend to do in the late game.
Yeah. Although having lost 2 of his Deathrite Shaman now, he's got a little bit less of that. But there's Abrupt Decay on the Tarmogoyf, so now Andrew can start attacking John's life total somewhat here.
Certainly one of the better cards to come out of the recent deck boxes.
Oh yeah, it's a certainly for older formats, it's not had a massive impact in Standard, but in Modern and Legacy, it's been a huge addition to the card pool, and has at least made Counterbalance a little bit less oppressive, which I'm sure quite a lot of people are cheering about. Although the fact that bug decks seem to, for at least a period of time in Legacy, bug decks became like pretty much the deck to play, probably didn't go down as
Deals
well.
with a Chalice of the Void.
Yeah, it does indeed.
We actually had a funny game in Neil Rigby's deck, his Aura's deck, where his opponent had a Chalice for 1 and 2 out, but Neil could still draw a card off each of his Auras before.
Yeah, that was Matt Light
Oh,
again.
sorry,
Yeah, it was Matt Light against Jim Corwood, where I think Matt drew about 20 cards before realising he didn't have Crows and Grip in his deck and just decided to scoop.
And there goes the bottle.
Sorry to Mountain Dew.
Get
I wonder-
that shit off the table.
I wonder if John will realise that someone's nicked his drink at this point, or if he's too
It's probably Matt
engaged.
Light drinking it, to be honest. He's scavenged enough free food and drink off everyone else this day.
We love you really, Matt. Now,
Who did he borrow the decks off again?
was it you this time round? I don't know. Oh, and it looks like John is going for the throat this time.
He only borrowed the Daybreak Coronets off me because that's a card nobody else would own.
As I said, it looks like it's straight up just burn you and attack you here from John. He did what we said, just built up enough power, and it looks like he's going to. Yep, with the persist on the stack, he aims the lightning helix at Andrew.
So John takes the first game rather surprisingly.